Hi there, ever been in a spot where you need to speak English and those words just vanish from your mind, even though you've spent hours learning them? It's like having a puzzle with all the pieces missing. I've experienced the same headache, and trust me, it's maddening. Here's a little secret: the problem isn't learning more words, it's about activating the ones sitting idle in your brain. Imagine your mind as a toolkit. You've got the tools, but do you know how to use them effectively? What if I told you there are simple techniques to bring those sleeping words to life just when you need them? Sound interesting? I promise you the answer is simpler than you'd think, and it's right here in this video. So don't go anywhere. We're going to uncover some clever tricks to transform your English from a jumbled mess into a clear message. And if you want to keep unlocking these tips and tricks, click that subscribe button. Think of it as your key to unlocking English fluency. So let's go. The common problem of English learners. Hey, have you ever been trying to speak English and suddenly, the words just vanish from your mind? You get that feeling like you know the word, you've studied it a bunch of times, but when it's time to talk, it just refuses to come out. Yeah, that's one of the most common problems that almost every English learner faces at some point. And hey, don't worry, you are totally not alone in this. This difficulty usually happens because there's a difference between knowing a word and actually knowing how to use it. Our English vocabulary can be packed with words we've learned, but not all of them are ready to go for use in a real, spontaneous conversation. Having a huge vocabulary but not being able to grab those words when we need them is like having a closet full of clothes, but you can't find anything to wear when you got to go out. You ever felt like that? Share a time when this happened to you in the comments. Lots of English learners put time and energy into learning new words and more words, without realizing that the real challenge might be in waking up and getting solid with the ones they already know. And what happens then? A lot of the words, even the ones already learned, stay stuck in what we call passive vocabulary. That's vocabulary that you recognize when you see it or hear it, but you don't actively use it yourself. It can be frustrating, and you might even start to doubt your skills in the language. But the good news is, this is a challenge that can be totally beat with the right strategies and practice. The important thing is, don't get discouraged. Remember, having difficulties is just part of learning any language, and realizing where your difficulties are is the first step to getting past them. As we move forward, I'm gonna share methods and tips to turn this passive vocabulary into active, so you can speak English with more confidence and naturally. Turning passive words into active ones is a journey of discovery and practice. With the right strategies, you'll be able to bring these words into your day-to-day life in a smoother way. Let's start exploring how to do this together. How the brain stores words. Let's imagine our brain is like a refrigerator full of ingredients. You've got everything you need to make all sorts of recipes, but knowing which ingredients to use and when, that's what makes all the difference, right? Now think about how this fits into learning English. Having a big vocabulary is like having lots of ingredients in the fridge, but it doesn't always mean you can whip up any dish, or in our case, a sentence without some trouble. Our brain is an amazing machine, able to store and organize a huge number of things. When it comes to learning a language, it sorts and stores words in a way that sometimes seems like they're kept on different shelves, some ready for use right away and others that are hidden way in the back, out of reach. The main point here is that knowing a lot of words doesn't guarantee you can use them when you need to. Just like having ingredients doesn't mean you know how to cook a dish without a recipe in front of you, knowing words doesn't mean they're ready to form sentences when you're chatting in English. Plus, our brain tends to store words in two main ways: as part of our active vocabulary or passive vocabulary. Active vocabulary is what we use often, and it comes naturally in conversations. Passive vocabulary is made up of words we recognize when we read or hear them, but we hardly ever use actively. So, if you feel like you know a lot of words, but when it comes down to it, they disappear, it's because they're stored in a passive way. But don't worry, this is totally normal. The truth is, our brain needs to be trained so these words move from the back of the fridge to the front, ready to be used anytime. The good news is there are strategies to turn passive words into active ones, letting you actually use all that vocabulary you've already stored. Over the next topics, we're going to explore ways to reorganize your mental space So these words are always within reach, ready to be used at the right moment. Let's turn this passive vocabulary into something alive and kicking in your English. Active vocabulary versus passive vocabulary. Let's get into understanding the crucial difference between active and passive vocabulary. This difference might just be the key to leveling up your English fluency. Think of it like two separate lists in your mind. One is the vocabulary you use regularly, and the other is made up of words you recognize but don't often use. This difference is what can make it easy to understand a book, but kinda hard to express an idea with the same richness of words. Active vocabulary is like your favorite tools, the ones you always use and know exactly where they are. These are the words that come out naturally in your daily chats and writing. They're the words you grab without thinking too much, expressing your ideas clearly and effectively. Just like when you pick out your favorite t-shirt without having to dig through the closet. In English, these words are always on the tip of your tongue. Now, passive vocabulary is like those tools you know you have, but they're at the back of a drawer only used once in a while. They look familiar when you see or hear them, but they're not that easy to get to when you need to use them. In the context of English, you might recognize them in reading or listening, understanding the situation they're in, but they don't pop up naturally when you're speaking or writing. Why is this difference so important? Well, because having a big passive vocabulary can make you feel confident in some parts of language learning, like reading and listening. But when it's about using those words in a real conversation, you might get frustrated because you can't get to them right away. Let's make this clearer. Imagine you're watching a movie in English. You get the story, the jokes make sense, but when you try to talk about the plot with a friend in English, the words just don't come. They were there, active while you were listening, but they didn't turn into active use. This happens because without practice, your brain filed these words away as secondary, ready for recognition, but not for using. Moving from passive to active vocabulary is where the real growth happens. And it takes two things, practice and context. To turn passive words into active ones, you gotta use them regularly in talks and writings. Reading or hearing the words isn't enough if you don't practice them. Think about your native language. How did you get fluent in it? It wasn't just by listening, it was by speaking, writing, making mistakes, and trying again. One good trick is to make these words part of your everyday talks. Whenever you can, try to use words you recognize but that aren't part of your daily vocabulary. Another good way is using context flashcards where you don't just memorize the word, but also put it in a real sentence. This helps your brain connect the word to how it's actually used. Also, use familiar situations. For example, if you're learning words about a hobby or job, use them while you're doing those activities. If you know a lot of cooking words in English, practice those words while you're actually cooking, naming each ingredient and step in English. Another tip is to keep your interactions in English going for longer. If you're writing in a journal, try to write more about your feelings and daily experiences. When the practice is constant and changes in context, your passive vocabulary starts to naturally come out as active. The difference between active and passive vocabulary is what can really take your fluency from getting by to speaking fluently. As you keep practicing, you'll see real and steady growth in your ability to talk in English effectively. If these tips already gave you a new way of seeing things, don't forget to hit the like button on the video so we can keep sharing more insights like this. So let's keep fine-tuning these language tools, turning book smarts into real practice. Accumulating versus activating known words. Now let's dig deeper into the difference between piling up words and really activating them. This is super important for anyone learning a language. Imagine you're building a collection of words, always learning new ones through reading, classes, or apps. This pile of words might seem like it's boosting your language skills, but the real magic happens when you turn these words into an active part of your vocabulary. Piling up words is like collecting postcards. You might have hundreds of them nicely organized, but if you have no reason or situation to use them, they're just collectibles, not practical tools. Same deal with learning a bunch of words without practicing them in speaking or writing. It limits your ability to talk naturally. In other words, knowing a word and having its meaning ready at the tip of your tongue are definitely different skills. When we talk about activating words you already know, we're talking about getting into a proactive way of learning. You need to take action to move something from the passive side of just recognizing it to the active side of actually using it. And this change doesn't just happen by collecting a bigger list of vocabulary. It needs you to carefully pick words and phrases that matter to your day-to-day and practice using them as part of your daily talks. Let's picture a situation where you learn words related to the workplace, terms you already know but hardly ever use. Spend some time focusing on using these words in conversations or writing reports, even if it's just in practice exercises. This pushes your brain to bring these words permanently into your active vocabulary. It's effective training that, if you stick with it, leads to big improvements in fluency. Another powerful way to activate words is to connect them with emotions or personal experiences. Emotional memory is a strong tool in language learning. When you can link a word to something important, a situation, or even a feeling, it becomes way easier to get to in future conversations. For example, if you learn the word exuberant, you could connect it to the day you visited a garden full of bright flowers, making an emotional event that sticks the word in your active memory. Also, make up short sentences or stories using words you want to activate. At first, this might seem like a lot of work, but it can really pay off big time. Besides getting better at making and structuring sentences, this practice makes using words solid in your active memory. As you tell, write, or say these stories, you're building a faster and more natural way to get to the words. A good tip is to cut down on the number of words you try to activate at once. Start with a small list of, say, 5 to 10 words and work on them for a week in different situations and different contexts. This not only helps you remember them, but also keeps the process fun and less overwhelming. Finally, remember that learning a language is an ongoing cycle. The key isn't just knowing new words, but knowing how to use them when needed. Activating known words takes purpose, constant practice, and a wish to commit to deeper learning. So in your next study time, challenge yourself to activate those words that are already familiar but not an active part of your daily talks. This small change can make a big difference. Transitioning from passive to active vocabulary. Moving words from passive vocabulary to active vocabulary is key to getting better at talking in English. This process changes words you just recognize into words you use easily and confidently. Passive vocabulary is made up of words you get when you hear or read, but don't use actively when you speak or write. Changing to active vocabulary needs constant practice and purposefully exposing yourself to these words in different situations. Start by putting passive words into your daily routine with continuous storytelling. This means making up little stories about your day in your head, but consciously using the passive words you want to activate. Besides making your knowledge stronger, this helps build a practical connection with each word, making them part of your day-to-day life. Another useful method is spaced repetition. Go back to passive words at regular times, minutes, days, weeks, to make the learning and remembering stronger. Repeating at different times gets the vocabulary into your long-term memory, turning these words into an active part of your vocabulary. Joining conversation groups can speed up the process of activating words. When you talk with other learners, pay attention to purposefully using terms from your passive vocabulary. Hearing and speaking in a social setting makes the understanding stronger and gets your memory going. Writing is another underestimated tool for activating words. Write short pieces or journals using these words. This not only makes it easy to repeat them as needed, but also makes your understanding of the context stronger. Also, try making flashcards with full sentences instead of just single words, letting your mind build a more natural and practical link with the vocabulary. Watching stuff in English, like movies or shows, helps you see words in context. Try to recognize passive words during talks and try to use them in your own situations after watching. Repeating the use after understanding makes it easier to change them into active vocabulary. Finally, changing from passive to active vocabulary takes patience and purposeful practice. By using these strategies regularly, you change passive recognition into active skill, boosting your fluency and confidence when speaking English. The importance of context in vocabulary. When it comes to learning a new language, especially English, understanding words on their own often isn't enough. True mastery is in getting how these words flow together in a context. This contextual understanding is what changes storing words in your mind into effective and natural communication. First off, it's key to know that words are hardly ever alone when used in real life. They get meaning and importance from how they're put together in phrases, sentences, and talks. Taking a word and connecting it to real, lively phrases or situations makes it way more memorable. For example, instead of just learning the word bargain, it's way more useful to learn it in a sentence like, "I got a great bargain on my new shoes." When you bring new words into your vocabulary, always try to put them in sentences or situations you know. One trick is to write short stories or little jokes that use these words. This not only helps to remember their meaning, but also gives a deeper understanding of how the word works in different situations. This way, when you see the word again, you'll be more ready to use it correctly in the right context. It's also helpful to note down real examples of where you found or used the word, whether in books, movies, or conversations. This makes a kind of mental roadmap you can use when you need to use the word again. Tell me in the comments, which word are you focusing on activating in your vocabulary right now? Also, putting words into context in your everyday talks makes practice something natural and effective. Every time you use a word in a real chat, you make your understanding of it stronger, making it easier to get to in the future. This also encourages thinking in English, since you start to connect words directly to ideas without translating in your native language. Listening to native speakers talking English is a great way to see words in context. Spoken English is full of expressions and sayings that only make sense when you get the context. Watching movies, shows, or even videos from content creators can give rich chances to hear and learn the contextual use of words. Finally, never underestimate the power of asking or clarifying when you don't understand something. Questioning how a word is used or how it's used in different contexts can completely change your understanding and ability to use it. Remember, contextual practice not only boosts your vocabulary, but also grows your overall understanding of English, making you more confident and natural in using the language. Understanding collocations. When aiming for fluency in English, getting collocations is key. Collocations are word combinations that happen together more often than just by chance. Mastering these combinations not only makes your vocabulary richer, but also makes your speaking and writing more natural and smooth. Why are collocations important? When you learn a new word, understanding the words that usually go with it helps you use it correctly and sound more natural, like a native speaker. For example, in English, we say make a decision, not do a decision. Getting familiar with these natural word combinations saves time that could be spent figuring out how to express an idea. To include collocations effectively, start watching for patterns in everything you read or hear in English. When you come across a new word, don't just memorize it alone. Check out the words that often show up with it. Tools like collocation dictionaries are especially helpful here, giving specific lists of these combinations. Putting collocations into your learning needs active practice. When studying, make sentences that use these combinations. For example, when learning the word heavy, you should know it's natural to use heavy rain instead of strong rain. Writing sentences or short paragraphs using these expressions makes this mental connection stronger. Another good way is to use flashcards not just with words but with full collocations. This not only makes the word itself stronger but also its context of most likely and natural use. Besides helping to memorize the collocation, this method gets you more ready for real use. Engaging with real stuff like watching shows or listening to podcasts in English lets you spot collocations being used for real. As you expose yourself to this real language, you start to take in these combinations and use them without consciously thinking about it. Also, get into substitution exercises where you swap single words in sentences for more fitting collocations. This not only makes your knowledge of these expressions stronger but also makes your communication more accurate. The goal is to make using collocations second nature. This takes time, practice, and patience, but the benefits for fluency and naturalness are huge. Every time you use a collocation correctly, you take a step forward in speaking English more authentically and confidently. Over time, you'll see that your English becomes not just correct but smooth and natural, the sign of someone who really masters a language. Examples of collocations for natural fluency. Understanding and using collocations is a big step towards getting fluency and naturalness in English. These word combinations that sound naturally together are key for anyone wanting to communicate like a native speaker. Let's look at some examples and how they can be used to make your communication better. Let's start by getting that collocations come in different forms, covering verbs, adjectives, nouns, and more. Take responsibility as an example. Here, take is a verb that naturally goes with responsibility, more than have or do. This combination sends a clear and natural action when spoken or written. Using the right collocation shows confidence and accuracy in how you express yourself. Another example is break the news. This expression means to tell news, especially sensitive or unexpected information. If you want to tell someone about new info, using break the news adds accuracy and naturalness to the conversation. It shows you don't just know the language, but you also get the cultural things linked to it. Think about other common collocations like catch a cold, pay attention, or deep sleep. Each of these combinations exists in a specific space of understanding that, when used, communicates a clear and effective meaning. These kinds of collocations are essential for understanding and joining in conversations smoothly. To practice, try to use them in real situations. For example, catch a cold is naturally used when someone is starting to get sick. I think I'm catching a cold. Collocations give clarity without needing long or confusing explanations. When watching movies or shows, pay attention to the collocations used by the characters. This makes your listening better while also making you see how these combinations are used in real-life English. Try to spot phrases like take a break, make a mistake, give advice, among others. Try making sentences and using collocations in everyday sentences like in a journal or even in writing exercises. If you write about your day-to-day, try to put in phrases like do me a favor, make time, or strong opinion, watching how it changes your expressions into something more natural and makes sense. Having a solid understanding of collocations not only changes your vocabulary, but also makes your overall understanding and fluency in English better. As you get familiar, you'll see your confidence grow because the words together make sense in a more natural way, just how it should be. With focus and practice, collocations will become a part of your English, making it possible to communicate in a richer and more natural way. Using collocation dictionaries. One of the most effective tools to enrich your vocabulary and make your speech smoother and more natural in English is a collocation dictionary. These dictionaries offer a wealth of information about how words usually combine, letting you learn to use the language more accurately and authentically. Collocation dictionaries are different from regular dictionaries. While a normal dictionary gives definitions and examples for single words, a collocation dictionary focuses on word combinations that sound right together. By using these tools, you not only learn new words but also get how to use them in their most common context. Let's see how you can use these tools in your English study. When learning a new word, don't just stop at its meaning alone. Check in the collocation dictionary to find out the words it usually appears with. This teaches not just the meaning but also the job and use of the word, making your learning stronger. For example, when you look up the word interest, a collocation dictionary might show you combinations like take an interest in, hold interest, or growing interest. This helps understand how interest works in context and which verbs to use with it to express different ideas. Also, these dictionaries can grow your understanding of language details and changes. By checking out different collocations, you get exposed to new ways of saying things that are missed in normal learning. For example, instead of saying very angry, a collocation dictionary might suggest furious, a more natural and advanced way to express it. To get the most out of a collocation dictionary, make it part of your daily study. When writing, check the dictionary to see if your sentences are correct and natural. This not only makes your writing better but slowly improves your thinking in English as you start to take in these natural combinations. Listen actively when you watch English content, trying to spot collocations in real use and then check when needed to understand why they were used that way. This practice makes your listening better and strengthens correct use in talks. Plus, they're great for making your writing skills bigger. When writing essays or emails, using the right collocations changes your text, even simple text, into something that shows a higher and more natural level of English, boosting your confidence in English writing. Using collocation dictionaries is a way to make your language skills solid, moving from basic to a more advanced and intuitive English. As you get practice with these tools, you'll start to speak and write with a fluency that shows real use of the language. So make collocation dictionaries your good friends and see the positive impact on your ability to communicate in English. Practices to strengthen vocabulary and improve fluency. Getting good at a new language like English, the key to strengthening your vocabulary and boosting fluency is in constant practice and adding daily habits focused on active learning. Here are some effective ways to put these practices into your routine in a steady and fun way. One strong way is regular writing practice. Make it a habit to write daily in English, whether it's through a journal, social media posts, or short stories. This not only helps to remember vocabulary, but also grows the ability to organize your thoughts in English. Writing regularly lets you go back to and use new words and ideas, making them stick in your active memory. Another approach is constantly reviewing the collocations you've learned. Use collocation dictionaries as a common tool in your study. Pick a list of collocations each week and challenge yourself to use them in talks or writings you do on the spot. This not only makes your understanding of how words naturally combine better, but also makes your ability to speak in a way that sounds smoother and more natural better. Also, practice active reading. When reading a book, article, or anything else in English, highlight words or expressions you'd like to learn. Then write your own sentences using these words, aiming to make them stronger in your memory. This practice not only grows your vocabulary but also gives you a deeper understanding of how these words are used in context. Another valuable practice is active listening. Set aside time to listen to podcasts, music, or watch videos in English, focusing on spotting new words or collocations. Take notes of them and try to put them into your speaking or writing practice. Active listening makes you more familiar with the rhythm and tone of the language, as well as making your listening skills better. Also, get into reverse translation exercises. Pick a text in Portuguese, translate it into English, and then compare it with the original if you have it to see where you can get better. This exercise makes your ability to think in English better and trains your mind not to depend on word-for-word translations. Finally, don't underestimate the value of repetition. Use flashcards or learning apps where you can regularly review the words you're focusing on. Spaced repetition is an effective way that makes sure the vocabulary isn't just recognized but active and ready to use. Adding these practices not only strengthens your vocabulary but also boosts your fluency to a new level. Keeping challenging yourself and actively engaging with the language speeds up your progress and gets you closer and closer to reaching the fluency level you want. Like with everything in life, consistency is key to mastering English. Conclusion. So, did you get all the tips to make sure English words never run away on you when you need them most? Now's the time to put everything into practice and make your English as sharp as your favorite tools. If these tips brought new ideas and gave you a push in your learning, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is key for us to keep bringing valuable content. As usual, let's see how your listening and understanding skills are. Here's the secret phrase of the video. When my words sleep, I wake up my fluency too. I want you to complete this sentence in the comments with what made sense to you. Write what you understood and change this sentence into something that fits with your experience. Let's share and grow together. And don't worry, because we'll always be here uncovering and revealing the Learn English secrets. Keep practicing and keep discovering the Learn English secrets by clicking on this video or this playlist right here. See you in the next video.